Are you serious? Are you serious? Well, President Assad of Syria says his forces must push on in the attacks on the suburbs of Damascus there in Ghouta, eastern Ghouta. Matter of fact, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said on Sunday that his forces must push on with their campaign to retake the besieged enclave of eastern Ghouta from the rebels, despite mounting international calls to end the bloodshed. You know, I've been telling people that he's been bombing that area, and folks have been sending me emails saying, Pastor Begley, Assad's not doing the bombing, it's other people doing it. Assad himself has come out and said, yes, he's the one doing it, and his forces are going to keep doing it. He's going to continue to try to stamp out all of the resistance he's faced over the last 5 years since the Arab Spring began. Matter of fact, Assad's forces have seized over a quarter of the enclave in Damascus's eastern edges after 2 weeks of devastating bombardment, according to a war monitor. And as the United States, Britain, and France step up pressure on Damascus and Moscow to call off the assault, the United Nations said it plans to deliver much-needed humanitarian aid to the suburbs of Damascus. Matter of fact, the majority of the people in eastern Ghouta want to escape the embrace of the terrorism. The operation must continue, says Assad, and he told journalists this in his remarks in a broadcast on state-run television yesterday. Regime backer Russia last week announced daily 5-hour humanitarian pauses in eastern Ghouta, but while the aid campaign has eased, fighting has intensified on the ground. And Assad said civilians would still have the possibility to evacuate this area while denying there was any contradiction between a truce and ongoing fighting. Matter of fact, his remarks came as the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said regime airstrikes on eastern Ghouta killed 34 civilians, including 11 children yesterday. And these are Assad's numbers. These are Assad's numbers. Now, the Britain-based monitoring group said earlier that the regime forces had advanced to within 3 kilometers of Ghouta's main town, and after retaking more than 25% of the area. The advance of the back of the 15 days of airstrikes, artillery fire, and rocket attacks that are reported to have killed more than 650 civilians sent hundreds of people into flight to western parts of the city. Matter of fact, the United States issued a statement yesterday condemning this last 2 weeks of assaults and accusing Moscow of ignoring the United Nations Security Council resolution calling for a 30-day ceasefire of all hostilities. It said Russia has killed innocent civilians under the false auspices of counterterrorism operations. And earlier Sunday, the United States President Donald J. Trump and British Prime Minister Theresa May said Russia and Syria were responsible for the heartbreaking human suffering in eastern Ghouta. And with support of the Russian airplanes, the Syrian military has advanced on several fronts, retaking control of the farms and villages, a military source told state media. The source said the government forces seized a number of districts, including several on the outlying areas around Damascus, and had eradicated terrorist groups on the eastern outskirts of Damascus. And so Damascus continues to be this ruinous heap, no longer really functioning as a city. And about 70% of the city of Damascus has been completely destroyed and is in really ruins and rubble. There was a prophecy in the Bible, which we've been sharing with you since this all began. It's found in Isaiah 17, verse 1, but it's also in Jeremiah. And it says, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city and it shall be a ruinous heap. Now, the process of this taking place, even Joel Rosenberg wrote a book called Countdown to Damascus. But if you go into the book of Jeremiah, there's another prophecy I want to share it with you about Damascus. It's Jeremiah chapter 49, starting at verse 23. Concerning Damascus, Hamath is confounded, and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are faint-hearted. There is sorrow on the sea. It cannot be quiet. Damascus is waxed feeble, and turneth herself to flee. And fear has seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her as a woman in travail. How is the city of praise not left, the city of my joy? Therefore her young men shall fall in the streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in their day, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus. Folks, this prophecy alert is certainly taking place right here, right now, as it relates to the destruction, if you will, or the collapsing, certainly the suffering that's going on in Damascus. I'll be back with more current world events and how they relate to biblical prophecy. Don't miss today's live broadcast. Starts at 12 noon Eastern. That's 12 noon Eastern at my website at www.paulbegleyprophecy.com.